Hello and most welcome to 1862 of the series. We will continue with the article from the Studies in the Book of Revelation by Steve Moyise. Last time we start to look into details about the complexities of the contradictions, how contradictions are present in reality. They stem from reality, evicting them. I think it's actually pretty close to taking away use in the Wittgensteinian take. Getting rid of contradictions is ridding the text or what you're saying of meaning. And it's also taking away goodness. Why is the modern day so clearly personified as having no goodness in it? The reason is this mistaken left hemisphere take on goodness. That for there to be goodness, evil should be evicted. That wasn't a problem when the Bible was written. We were right hemisphere related at that time. But now with the left hemisphere, we look for original, we look for things that didn't exist in those days. So when they write goodness and evil in the book of Revelation, for instance, or any of the biblical books, that will have a meaning to the right hemisphere, which is very different from how we read it with the left hemisphere. I am quite convinced that we are approaching a paradigm shift. Helpful in this is, of course, the Nobel Prize to 3 quantum mechanical engineers and geniuses, Alan Aspect, John Clauser, and Zeilinger. But also helpful is the books by Ian McGilchrist and his incredible work of collecting research evidence that stretches over several subjects to show how the left hemisphere is taken over. Nobody would have looked for an original at the time of the Bible, or not even in the Middle Ages. But now we do. Now it's the dominion of the left hemisphere. And that needs to be addressed. If it's not addressed, we will get a completely different Bible, having nothing in, no connection whatsoever to the actual Bible. And sayings like go to the original or have only the Bible and have no use, have no acts. It's giving a clearance to the left hemisphere to take over even the Bible. I think that is important to acknowledge. The modern day read of the Bible is so different from how it was intended. I think even the magic of cutting out the text from its surroundings and to say sola scriptura it's not part of the language game at all. What would it mean to do that? No one has ever done it before. It lacks meaning, and therefore there are a million interpretations to it, or at least, well, possibly millions and millions and millions. 30,000 reformed sects now, all having their private box of understanding. And there is another thing. There is an impossible idea of the reader not enter into what's read. That is supposed to be taken away by the original or the monosemic reading of the Bible. There is no pure reading of anything, not in the way of what the left hemisphere would have it as. So let's go into where we left off with 1860. A multidimensional approach. Is the book of Revelation best served by finding ways to eliminate all interpretations other than the one's own? Or should we acknowledge that such a text is capable of generating more than one valid interpretation? The answer depends on what one considers to be the purpose of interpretation. If it is simply to shed light on the text, there's no intrinsic reason why multiple interpretations should not be allowed. For example, science recognizes that certain experiments show that light behaves like a wave with a measurable frequency and wavelength, while others show it to be a stream of particles. Nothing is gained by suppressing one of these interpretation in favor of the other. Both give insight into the nature of the phenomenon we call light. Similarly, it is a common experience that reading Revelation from a variety of perspectives leads to a fuller appreciation of the text. If this is combined with an articulation of the interpreter's social location, rhetorical purpose, and methodology, as Schüssler Fiorenza urges. This is likely to be even more useful. One then has both the type of experiment that has been performed on the text and the results that it yielded. On the other hand, if the goal of interpretation is to promote the Christian faith, empower oppressed people, or some other ideological purpose, then certain interpretations need to be resisted. They are not necessarily inferior readings if judged by historical or literary criteria alone. But they are inferior when judged by certain ethical or ideological commitments. Some will call this an imposition on the text, but it is surely in keeping with the ethos of revelation, which challenges the very possibility of ethical or political neutrality. Thus,
I am completely in favor of reinterpreting the military imagery of Revelation in a non-military way.
Way, I did it my way.
Way.
I did it.
But I am skeptical of those
Positions that confidently tell us that this is what John intended, or that this is the proper literary reading of the text. The relative instability of the lion-lamb juxtaposition is a constant reminder of how easily the oppressed can become the oppressor. However good and noble John's motives might have been or might not have been, he is not exempt from this, as Carey says. John's ethos cannot sustain both resistance and mutuality. John subordinates every other voice to his own. He demands absolute obedience from his audience and everyone, Christian or otherwise, who would diverge from John's vision stands under his curse. The curse.
Curse. Curse.
Curse. It's scary. I am afraid. Curse scares me.
Yes.
Readers might adopt the view that the end justifies the means.
The means.
Here comes the Jesuits. The danger of assimilation or collusion or falling away is such that it justifies John's strong response. But the modern interpreter surely has a responsibility to point out the dangers of such a strategy, which have frequently been actualized in history. The lion roar, lamb
is not so stable.
That readers are forced to reinterpret the apocalyptic violence in non-violent ways.
I did it my way.
Did it my way in the end. It is imperative that they do so for the good of humanity.
Good. Good.
But it is also imperative that they realize the precarious instability of such a position. Thus, in answer to this chapter's title, I do not think the lion does lie down with the lamb. The juxtaposition allows a non-violent interpretation, but it also reveals a fundamental danger, namely that the weapons of resistance can end up supporting the very values being resisted. 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 It does not do justice to the book of Revelation to advocate a position where lamb simply replaces lion. Let's hear a roar. Roar.
Oh.
Evil is much more complex than that. That terminates studies in the book of Revelation and the specific article, Does the Lion Lie Down with the Lamb by Steve Moyise. So let's go to some memorable quotes here. And of course, as you all know, it heated up towards the end, most definitely. It became incredibly interesting, to say the least. I am completely shocked by it's from where did that come? I will not start with that interesting thing, though. We leave the goodies for the last. If you go to page 193, So there is a question in the beginning. I also like the title, A Multidimensional Approach. And there is little, if any, risk that the author here is suggesting XYZ. So the very idea that the dimensions, so to speak, are outside of the origo and that we are somehow situated within this orthogonal room of space, that in itself leads to interesting ideas of interpretation. Because listen here, is the book of Revelation best served by finding ways to eliminate all interpretations other than one's own? Or should we acknowledge that such a text is capable of generating more than one valid interpretation? There are several problems here. It's the idea that the text has different approaches, which is, I think it's good to say, but the idea that they come from different subjective takes, that is one coming from the Cartesian multidimensional idea. We do not have inner and outer re-entering. So the inside is supposed to be completely subjective in some manner. So I can read that here. The answer depends on what considers to be the purpose of interpretation. And the previous sentence is also very Cartesian. Or even more in the first sentence, to eliminate all interpretations other than one's own. It's ridiculous in a way to think that the subjective is not shared. It's not shared from the outside, it's not shared from the inside. We are inhabiting a similar life world, and by our actions, we do not differ that much. And if someone eliminates all other views on something other than his or her subjective, doesn't mean it's not the true meaning or the objective meaning. Very important lesson from the Klein bottle logic. Very important lesson from the denial of the possibility of a private language. There is an indirect idea here in the text, I'd say, that it would be really bad to eliminate all other people's views, and that it becomes Newtonianly more scientifically valid or concise, maybe it's a better word, or higher quality. That's Newtonian, that's Cartesian. So the multidimensional approach, the multidimensional is the XYZ idea, if that even is an idea. So let me illustrate this with more words. It's the idea that the inner is an oasis of strange, exotic, subjective takes. completely separated from the outer objective pure. The inner is tainting the outer. It's a tainter, as Jacques Monod would say. It destroys the outer, and there is no good to be found in this understanding. There are other more positive ones, but in this understanding, the subjective is a tainter. And sometimes that could be strengthened by terminology. Oh, it's an egoistic take, or usually it's just enough with subjective. This is shut away by the PLA, the private language argument. This is not how we participate in the world at all. Eradicating oneself doesn't lead to anything sensible. Doesn't get more objective, it doesn't get less subjective, whatever that would be. What does it even mean? It's like, read Thomas Nagel, get into what things are. But it's very good in the way, I like other stuff that Moyise wrote, definitely, but in this way it exposes the tendency of private language argument, the private language idea, that the inside is more one's own and cannot be shared by others. It's filled with naughty stuff like, maybe, I don't know, emotions or wishes, and it's only inside the person that destroying subjective substance. I always find in these takes the subjective to be sort of a muddy brown thing, not black negative, but somehow. And as soon as this muddy thing enters into the pure reality, it muddles things. And we are highly impressed by this, even to the extent that we prefer to use expressions, the case seems to be like, or it's proven this is like, or we understand it is like. But go to Japan, if you don't write, I think it is this way, or I believe it to be this way, or I wish it, even more common, I wish it to be this way, it wouldn't make any sense. So we live in the posteriority of Newton and the Industrial Revolution and the time of Enlightenment, whether it's a good thing to eradicate something that I would say doesn't even make sense to mention, but it's often called the subjective. Some sort of inherent evil that needs to be pressed down. Doing that will only lead to one thing: confusion. I would say utmost confusion. For God's sake, there are a lot of languages where you can't express these things even. So how do they do it? Japanese, Korean, how do they do it? Majority of the Amerindian languages don't have this subjective. It can never be explained. It's the Beatle box that's playing up. There is no subjective. Not like that, anyway. if the observer can be there with all her greed, wishes, egotistical needs, you will have the best thing you can do. If the football player enters the game with a wish to win the game, to be given a gold medal, that will be the best game that can be. But if you go in like Jacques Monod and try to what you call suppress what you believe to be subjective, you would just disrupt the game. And that lack of good use we can notice. It was noticeable perhaps in Descartes on the outside somehow. The inside is never ever shut out from the outside. It is participatory. And here, by happenstance, by glorious luck, ended a sentence in this text that exactly points to that. And as you have may noted by that, there is a reference to quantum mechanics. Let me read a couple of lines down. This is a fantastic gem to be found. For example, science recognizes that certain experiments show that light behaves like a wave with a measurable frequency and wavelength, while others show it to be a stream of particles. Nothing is gained by suppressing one of these interpretations in favor of the other. Both give insight into the nature of phenomenon we call light. They do. They are complementary, not in the way that usually thought, the idea that together they make a full map of the world. No, they are completely contradictory. They do not make a full world, they make much more. Both are needed, but they can't be put on the same piece of paper. No chance. And nothing is gained by suppressing one of these interpretations in favor of the other. Well, if you suppress the other, why ever you should do that? No one does it. You wouldn't have science anymore. It would be a piece of nonsense. The perspectives do not need to be added. It's natural in us to take in all perspectives. Once we understand that we are constantly building up a world, we are engaging in the world, and that the subjective is the objective, so to speak, to use the author's own word. If the subject is not willing, wanting with all her soul, it will be less subjective as well. It's light and particle. I think from the perspective of quantum mechanics, go chasing for the subjective is a little bit like Don Quixote's fight against the windmills. It doesn't make sense. What is it you are supposed to attack? What is this deviant subjectivity? It is hiding the beetle box, the scarabee somewhere, that there is a private language inside each and every one of us, and interpreting anything in that language that wouldn't be understandable to anyone else. It's only understandable to the person himself or herself. That, I'd say, is a patently wrong assumption. It's not, it's a thinking mistake, which could be worse because it affects all other thinking as well. Maybe the best thing that could happen if you are in that category is that you start feeling guilty for being yourself. At least that makes, no, it doesn't make any sense, but you can go with that guilt the rest of your life. If you go to the very end of the text here on the next page, if you might. It is great that he compares light and particle to the lion-lamb juxtaposition. You can read on the fourth line here, and it's the fifth, sorry. The lion-lamb juxtaposition is not so stable that readers are forced to reinterpret the apocalyptic violence in non-violent ways. This is also good and bad here. It's fantastic to have the lion and lamb juxtapositioned in that way. I love that. I love that. There's complementarity. But violence doesn't mean that you don't have peace to 100%. 100% wave in quantum mechanics doesn't mean that the particle disappear. Not at all. And particle wave is, I would say, even more contradictory than evil and good. It will make up what is 100% good to bring in the evil. It can be as good as possibly possible. Whereas you try to take away the evil, then you get this word that doesn't mean, acts that doesn't mean. You dilute everything because you're misusing the language, and there is no forgiveness there. In the beginning, there is. For a while, your words will, at least to yourself, ring true. But the more you break it, the less meaning your words will have. And taking away the evil doesn't mean anything, doesn't have a meaning here. It's the left hemisphere who wants to purge evil, purge it, bring it away, take it away. So we have only goodness. It's like taking a good claret and say, I just want to have the alcohol. Take away all the taste, all the evil of particles that are in the wine. There are malic acid, there are lactic acid, there are tartic acid. Take those away. Purity of the alcohol. It doesn't even have color. This is what we need. And in the process, we actually get rid of the wine. We add an element of fixatedness that doesn't do justice to the Bible anymore. And we're not subjective, we're just misunderstood and misinformed. And we carry on. And of course, the very common theodicee problem, if that's how it's pronounced in English, how can there be a God if there is so much evil in the world, is answered by the quantum mechanical take. No doubt. There cannot be goodness without evil. It doesn't mean that we have a mixture of good and evil as the left hemisphere. And it doesn't mean that we can have 100% goodness. It is just nonsensical conclusions to violently, because the left hemisphere is attacking violence. This is not kindness. This is not compassion or anything like that. It's a violent attack on violence. And in this strengthen and sharp polarity, the same sharpness that we find between the concepts, then we have this lack of energy, the lack of telling. It's just very interesting. This is a lucky synchronicity that light and particle duality came up here. Kalle, what do you say? Are you surprised as well? Or what are your comments? Do join, please.
Yes, it's a surprise. So
Big
Moyise.
surprise. Did you know
Yes,
it?
it was a surprise that Moyise, he is the first one in biblical studies who refers to real science. So Moyise deserves our praise, insight, that he has this insight.
Definitely.
So I completely agree with this. This is all Bible scholars should actually read this paragraph, because there is so much wisdom in this paragraph on this page 193.
It's just fantastic. It's just fantastic.
But let me nevertheless criticize Moyise a little bit, very tenderly, because he deserves our praise.
Yeah, definitely.
So does he answer to this chapter's title? I do not think the lion does lie down with the lamb. So Moyise proposes that the lion does not lie down with the lamb. Moyise is creating a violent polarity when he denies the possibility that they can lie together. So he's, on the one hand, Moyise is agreeing to this light duality, but then he recreates this duality, this violent opposition. We don't need to see them. So let's imagine this is he's speaking about lying down, that is like a meadow. Why cannot you see lion lying with the lamb? We don't need, so Moyise doesn't like it. He's thus creating a violent polarity, separating, so to say, power, force of the lion with meekness of the lamb, so to say. But they always entangled. They can lie together perfectly well, I think. Do you agree, Hans, or would you disagree?
No, I do agree.
And let me actually take something that might support my reading. This was about Testament of Joseph. This is a Hellenistic text, Testament of Joseph. Here. This is from Testament of Joseph. I saw a virgin was born from Judah, wearing a linen stole, and from her was born a spotless lamb. And at his left there was something like a lion, and all the wild animals rushed against him, but the lamb conquered them and destroyed them, trampling them underfoot. So here, this phrase is ambiguous. At his left there was something like a lion.
Yeah.
The lion on the lamb's side, or is the lion against the lamb? I say it's deliberately ambiguous. So they could be even lying together, so to say, or standing together. But they could also be opposing, of course. We need this force that they could lie down together, but also not lie down together. Do you understand?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And let me read an famous passage from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 11. Let me see. And here, 11 verse 6. This is actually, I think Moyise is referring to this text in his title. Chapter 11 verse 6. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf, and the young lion, and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. 7. And the cow and the bear shall feed, the young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and the suckling child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters of the sea. So this is a very poetic passage. And here we read about the lying down. We have wolf and lamb, the traditional opposites.
Yeah, I see that. Wolf dwell with the lamb, yeah.
And leopard shall lie down with their kid. So I think Moyise refers to this. Is his paraphrase. Actually, this Isaiah 11 actually contradicts Moyise's claim, because it says leopard shall lie down with a kid. Okay, kid could represent here the lamb. It's the lamb. Leopard is the lion, so to say. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So this contradicts Steve Moyise's conclusion.
Indeed. Very good.
So this was actually what I wanted to say. So I love Moyise. Moyise is he deserves absolutely our praise.
Yeah.
And the point is that we need opposition. Like the light can be both particles and waves, but they're not violent oppositions. Sometimes they're violent, so we can be need. Oppositions are both violent and non-violent. That is also an important relation of quantum physics. Oppositions are both violent and non-violent, like here. So there is a opposition violent, but at the same time it's not violent. And the lion can lie down with the lamb, and also cannot lie down with the lamb.
Yeah. I do agree. Yeah, definitely.
So I think if I can propose an ending to this paper, is that you have a more poetic voice, you read these beautiful verses as I conclude, and then you end the phrase. Because you need to read this. This is very poetic, touching. I think it's a good way to end with a little bit of poetry.
Beautiful. I'll read it. Thank you for the compliment. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf, and the young lion, and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed. The young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. And the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of knowledge of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea.
Thank you.
Why, thank you. Thank you for lovely comments. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Have a very pleasant morning, day, afternoon, wherever you are. Bye bye for now.